Hello everybody, and welcome back to my office in Sicelift 117. Today I am going to talk to you about what we discussed in lecture in the classroom just a minute ago. Now, the last time you all got a video from me, it was a quick introduction to modernity. And I want to talk a little bit more about that now, give you a preview of some of the stuff that you're going to be reading, and then I am going to talk to you about paper one. So let's get started with that talk about modernity. What does modern mean? It is different from contemporary. Contemporary means around or about the same time and space, whereas modern in this term actually means a focus on the function. A chair is something you sit on. It is not ornate, straight lines, not done for aesthetic purposes. A lot of times it's best to think about that in terms of architecture. Really ornate buildings versus a box that you go and work out in a gym or something like that. So as far as when we say modern, we're talking about the function of things, and in this case, the function of rhetoric. Now, as you know, I told you that we sort of split into three during this time period. We have the scientific, the aesthetic, and rhetoric. In this case, all of those are defined by their function. Science is used to find things out. The aesthetic, to please. And rhetoric, to honestly function as speech. So at the time, we get the elocutionary movement. The father of that movement's name is Hugh Blair. And he talks specifically about only focusing on paralanguage and nonverbals. And this elocutionary movement led us to a practice called recitation. That is the reciting of speeches. And I think I might have mentioned this before. As a function, rhetoric would also sometimes be a literally written out, memorized work. So there was not an aesthetic to it. It wasn't the sort of impromptu or extemporaneous speaking that we teach you how to do in COM 115. It was literally you write something down, memorize it, and deliver it in a certain style, in the best style. The style that is going to make it sound the best, whatever that is. So that is where we come to understanding people during the modern period. One of the people that I don't have you read, but I want to talk about briefly, is someone named Margaret Fell, literally F-E-L-L, like I fell down. Margaret Fell was writing during a time when women had no rights, and in fact, she married a circuit judge because she, in order to keep the family estate and the riches that she had to marry a man because women could not own their own property, and she didn't have any brothers. So it would have been passed to somebody else in the family, the next male in line, whoever that might be. But Margaret married a judge named Judge Fell, and he traveled a lot because back then circuit courts, they're called circuit courts today, we go to them, but back then, literally if you were a circuit judge, it meant you made a circuit around to different towns in the area and be there on different days to settle various different issues. So he was gone a lot. And Margaret Fell was someone who was really interested in God, religion, and the Bible, and Quakerism specifically, which was not really a thing yet. But she met this preacher whose last name was Fox, and she really liked him. So she started inviting him to her estate to hold these sort of conclaves, these meetings, to get the community together to talk about God and the church and the Bible. Eventually, she started what was known in the Quaker religion now as the Circle of Friends, which is one of the first beginnings of Quakerism. And in that, she decided that it might be okay for women to advocate for God as much as men do. Like, that has to be right. So she wrote a piece called In Defense of Women's Speaking. And in that piece, she uses one source for evidence, and taking into account the time period, she says that she is writing so that women can speak in public, but only in churches, because we can't have women speaking in the dirty public, but we can have them speaking in churches in defense of God. So she writes this piece using the Bible as her only source, and explains that, there were three women that announced the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Mary Magdalene was trusted by Jesus. I forget what other examples she uses, but she uses these various examples. And Mary, it was Mary and God who had Jesus, not a man. So clearly God trusts women to speak for him as much as anybody else, and so women should be allowed to speak in church. I give this information to you, not because this was like the start of some feminist movement or something, but it was the first time that we really see someone advocate for a certain just a certain audience to be able to speak in a very specific context, and the justification for that. So it's very, rhetorically speaking, extremely specific in the way that she persuades and goes about making her argument. Okay, that's enough of that. Now let's move on to what you're going to be doing for the next 2 weeks, after spring break, who you're going to be reading 2 weeks from now. I want to give you an introduction to each of these writers because I think I assigned you to read their original works, and I figured you might want to know what to look for. So let me give you the structure of what to look for from each of these authors. The first one I'm going to talk about is John Locke, yes, from the modern era, and he looked at rhetoric as a function for his social contract. So if you've never heard of John Locke before, he's mainly known for his philosophy and his idea of the social contract. Well, we all enter social contracts when we go into communities together, when we become communities, when we become friends. There's certain agreements we have amongst us all just being human. For example, we shouldn't kill or maim each other, things like that are sort of part of that social contract, that understanding that if I speak to you, you speak back, and so on. So he sort of goes back to what Bacon said about what language is. And language is the way that it's our currency. It's the way that we exchange ideas and agreements and so on. So he said that since that's the way it functions, we must acknowledge a couple of things. First of all, language is different for the speaker and for the receiver of a message because the meaning is different. I believe he refers to this as internal meaning and external meaning, right? There's the meaning that we intend, there's the meaning that is received by other people who we are speaking to. And he says this causes a great deal of trouble. So he identifies 4 problems with language. I want you to read those because if I just tell you what they are without context, they're very complex. So I will let you read them, but I want you to identify those 4 problems with language that he discusses. And he also says that there's a solution to these 4 problems. That solution is purification. We need to purify our language. What does he mean by that? Well, this is where we get introduced to 2 terms you've probably heard before, denotative meaning and connotative meaning. Now, denotative meaning does not mean dictionary meaning. What it means is the generally agreed upon meaning of certain words. You put all of those together and you have a dictionary. So that's why people commonly say that denotative means dictionary definition. It means the generally agreed upon definition of the terms that you're using. So this was one of the ways that we could purify language, was to stick to the denotative meanings that are determined socially. Now, would this be by a bunch of, men sitting in a room somewhere? Absolutely. Remember that this is, the 1800s, 17 to 1800s. So definitely not involving anybody who didn't have money, land, status, education, or if they were female. Okay, so his second connotative, we often hear about it being context clues or contextual meaning, but that's not entirely it. It is also about all of the things that are attached to that meaning. So if you sort of think about like how your brain can sort of associate words to a whole string of ideas and thoughts, right? So for example, you say cat to me, I think about the poster that's behind my head, I think about warm and fluffy, I start associating the words, not just in word association therapy, but literally our brains start to associate words and meanings together. And that's what connotative meaning is. It's sometimes interpreted as how we feel about these words, okay? And so he says if we understand the distinction between denotative and connotative meaning, we'd be able to purify the language to resolve the 4 problems that he identifies in his work. So that's what you're going to be reading from John Locke. The next person is Giambattista Vico, V-I-C-O. I refer to him as just Vico because his first name's a mouthful. So Vico is one of the first people to address Bacon, Francis Bacon. He's saying to Bacon that the idea that that our senses or our senses enhanced by scientific instruments can tell us the truth may not be accurate. So he presents the question, is it better to find the truth with the methods of the modern or with the methods of the ancients? Ultimately, he decides the methods of the ancients makes more sense for one reason mainly, and that is when we claim certainty of truth, we no longer ask any more questions. We no longer seek to learn. So the old phrase of sort of, I know because I know how little I know. The recognition that we can't know everything completely is better because that keeps us asking questions to find more truth. Now, he has several reasons for this, and I'm going to let you read those reasons in his work on the study methods of our time. And that closes things up for Vico. He is known as one of the first to talk about the rhetoric of science. So unlike Aristotle, who says that a rhetorician explains the government to the people, in this case we're talking about someone who interprets science for the people. Okay, hope that helps. Now, we're going to talk about your paper. I got an email from someone who was kind of freaked out about this paper, and I believe that I let you all know that I have extended the deadline for paper 1. There is a very specific description of paper 1 in the syllabus and assignments tab to the left on Blackboard, the menu on the left. Unfortunately, today I discovered with my students in the classroom that the syllabus and assignments tab is way down in that menu. So there's a syllabus tab and there's an assignments tab, but then way down is a syllabus and assignments tab. And that's where I put all your syllabi, or all the assignments, the paper assignment, the paper rubric, a sample paper, okay? So it's understandable if you didn't dig in to find that. And whoever it was that emailed me, I thank you for letting me know that there was a question about this assignment. Initially, I was thinking to myself, no, there can't be a question about this assignment. And I went in and I found it. Well, it's ordered differently for you than it is for me. So right now, I'm going to go into Blackboard and I'm going to make sure I move that syllabus and assignments tab up so that you can go in there and read the description of your paper 1 assignment. There are a couple of things you should know about paper 1. It is not worth nearly what your final paper is worth. A lot of your points for this semester are going to be at the end. So it's important that I get these papers and grade them for you so that you can see how I grade and what I expect. so that when you do write a 400-point paper, I'm able to give you as many points as possible. I am more than willing to give everybody in the class an A. If that's what you earn, that's what I will give you. So, how do you ensure that you're going to get an A? If you look in that syllabus and assignments tab, which again, I'm going to move up on that left-hand menu for you. I think I'll put it at the top, even above announcements. If you'll look there, you will see a paper rubric. That is the grading rubric that I am going to use for both of your papers. So all you need to do, you don't start with a C in this class on a paper. You start with 0 points. And then you earn points as you write the paper. This rubric will tell you exactly what you need to do to get the grade that you want to get on your paper. There's no tricks to this. So I did give the people in the classroom, the students in the classroom, some tips, and I'm going to give those tips to you now too. I don't know how important these will be to you, or if you'll feel like I'm talking down to you in some way, and if that's the case, I apologize. But these are mistakes that I've seen get made on papers over the past 15 years, okay? So, first and foremost, there are a few pet peeves of mine. One is what's known as an unclear referent. What is an unclear referent? An unclear referent is when you use a pronoun like him, her, his, that, this, there, and I don't know to what you are referring. For example, if I say to you, Plato and Aristotle differed greatly in how they viewed truth and rhetoric, period. And then my next sentence is, he states that rhetoric will actually hide the truth. He is an unclear referent. You have at least 2 potential he's in the previous sentence. So that is unclear. It might feel like it gets repetitive, but better to be repetitive and clear and demonstrating your knowledge than to make me wonder what I'm supposed to be looking for. This is true also when you're moving from meaning in a point. For example, Smith, 2002, states that Aristotle believed that rhetoric and truth could potentially be the same, that rhetoric could be used to find the truth, period. That means this, or this means that. What is this? What is that? Totally unclear references, right? So to say this means whatever it's not clear. It's very unclear in its reference, okay? So that's one major pet peeve that I have. The second major pet peeve I have is that inanimate objects can't do things. For example, a book cannot explain something. This paper cannot demonstrate anything. So avoid having an inanimate object do something. That's very simple, but I fall into it still all the time. Unclear reference and inanimate objects doing things is something that I find myself doing. So, I thank God I have an editor, but maybe you could get yourself a friend to read it too, just to make sure that all of those are cleared up, because part of the reason you're getting the grade you're getting is because you're demonstrating to me your knowledge. So I don't want to know that you're confused, or I don't want you to tell me something that doesn't make sense. I just want you to be able to demonstrate your knowledge to me so I can give you the best grade possible. The last thing that I'm going to mention to you is organization in a paper. And again, this might be something that sounds like, I'm treating you like children, and I don't want to do that, but it also may not be something you've ever experienced before. You've experienced it in 115, I know that. I tend to function in threes. 3 is my favorite number, and my brain works in threes. So, for example, if somebody asks me a question, what do you plan to do if you get elected to the school board? I'm going to have three answers, 3 main points for you. And that's just how I write. Papers and speeches are no different. They have an introduction, they have 2 to 4 main points, and then they have a conclusion. The introduction has a thesis statement and then has a preview so that I know your organization. Your main points can have several paragraphs or just one. It depends on what you need to say in that paragraph. And your conclusion reviews those main points for me again and gives me a concluding statement, whatever that might be. So in between there, all you have to do, aside from filling those blanks, is add in transitions. So you don't have to say, my second point is, you could if you wanted to. But you could also begin your paragraph with, in understanding the Roman Republic, the oppositional position of the empire functioned as blah, blah, blah. You could do it that way too. So that is still pretty clear organization for me. So you can do that if you'd like. Once you look at the paper assignment as I originally wrote it at the beginning of the semester and posted it in that very weird place that it posted to, in there I give you three options. One is what I call the very open, very loose interpretation option, where you can literally pick any concept, topic, or idea that you want. The second one has a little bit more direction. I think it's maybe something like compare rhetoric in the Roman Republic and Empire, maybe something along those lines. A little bit more structured, but still pretty fluid. And then the final one is extremely structured and very specific. I think it says compare and contrast Aristotle and Plato in terms of truth. Something along that line that's very, very clear. So if you're a student who likes to write about your own thing, you can do that. If you're someone who needs some structure, you can have some structure. So it's up to you on what you write your paper on. Okay, hopefully that clarifies everything. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, enjoy your spring break. Your paper is due by 11:59 p.m. on March 22nd. I'll see you all on the other side.